Democracy creates stagnation, right? All right, so first of all, what is democracy? Well, democracy is essentially mob rule, right? The majority get to determine the election results and who gets to be in power and etc., etc. Right? Minority groups don't have any type of voting power and stuff, and this is kind of problematic and stuff. And this is why, democracy is kind of far, very, very, very far from being perfect. And you also have to this is like another big problem with democracy is that it creates a lot of hindrance towards progress, right? Because, let's say there's a king, right? And he wants to improve his society, right? There are no hindrances, right? He can quickly fund projects and get to work on improving, his society. He can start to fund different projects that would help his society, improve and get better and develop and become more prosperous, right? But, democracy it handicaps, not necessarily a king, because, in democracies, you get presidents and stuff like that. Kings, monarchies, that's something different, right? But, a president can't really do a lot, right? A president isn't like a king. A king, a good example of this would be, in Mughal India, right? One person there was a ruler called Shah Jahan and stuff. He had this project called the Taj Mahal and stuff, and he got all of the resources in India together, and he was funding this one project. And it's it's a marvel now, right? It's something that a lot of people around the world come and visit and look at, right? It's the Taj Mahal. Right? It's a monument, right? That's extremely interesting and eye-catching. Right? But if Mughal India was a democracy, this monument would have never ever been constructed, right? Because Shah Jahan he wouldn't have any type of authority to construct something like the Taj Mahal, right? He would be handicapped by the democratic process, right? By all of this different these different legal ramifications, right? That's associated with democracy and how democracy chooses its leaders, right? And then it handicaps its leaders and makes sure that they stay in line with the specific criteria, right? Otherwise, they get kicked out. Democratic leaders can't create any type of drastic changes in progress and stuff like that. They can't. They have to abide by a ton of restrictions and stuff. Whereas in monarchies and kings and rule and dictatorships, I would say, although that has a lot of negative connotations, right? So I don't like saying dictators, right? But it's not really that different from monarchies and stuff. But regardless, like a king he doesn't have any type of restrictions. He can go and do whatever he wants to get any type of amount of resources together, and he can fund projects and instantaneously improve the state of his society, right? There are no hindrances and stuff. Let's just say there's some type of social problem, right? He can get a bunch of people together and he can just quickly solve that problem instantaneously, right? But, a democratic leader would never have that type of authority, right? He would have to go through a bunch of different governmental bodies and stuff, a bunch of different governmental forces, right? A bunch of different legal work and stuff just to get one basic social problem fixed. Whereas, a king, that's not under a democratic state, right? He could do whatever he wants and stuff, and he can progress his society in any way he likes. He can shape his entire nation and give his nation some type of meaningful destiny, right? Because, in democracies, they eliminate this type of potential, right? They cause your nation, right, to just essentially stagnate, right? Your nation essentially goes nowhere, with democracy, right? Because no one, it's just all, the entire democratic process it heavily handicaps any type of democratic leader, right? It makes it so that he can only do so much for his nation, right? He can't really progress his nation or create any meaningful types of social changes, right? He just has to be handicapped, and this is very problematic and stuff. And you can see, in Europe, how democracy is cause Europe to stagnate in a lot of different ways, right? In Europe there are, you can look at the Middle East and stuff and say, well, look at you, see Europe is a lot better, right? Because, look at the Middle East, it's all corrupt and war-torn and horrible to look at and stuff. So, clearly Europe is far better and stuff. And so, democracy is better because, Europe is democratic. So that means that's why it's more stable and whatever. Of course, yeah, this is a lot. There is some truth to this, right? But, in Europe as a, let's just say as a civilization, as a society, all of the different societies in Europe, they're not really, like, they're not really going anywhere, right? They're kind of just stuck in the mud, so to speak, right? And this is what democracy does, right? It causes your whole society to just kind of stagnate and stay stuck in the mud. Why is this? It's because, again, democratic leaders, they don't have any type of strong authority to change their societies in meaningful ways, right? I'm going to bring it back to like Shah Jahan in the Mughal India, right? Because, Shah Jahan, the Taj Mahal, he took all the resources of India and he put it all on this project that he was trying to finish and complete, right? The Taj Mahal, which is now, it's a marvel of the world, right? But he, again, if Shah Jahan was if he was like under democracy, right? If he had to if he was some type of democratic leader, he would have never constructed the Taj Mahal, right? He would have never had that type of authority, right? Because democratic leaders, again, can only do so much for their nations. They have to go through a lot of legal work and other nonsense and stuff just to get basic things changed in their society. And this is really the big problem with democracies. They severely handicap your nation, right? They make it so that, your leaders can only do so much. Of course, a lot of people would argue and say, well, this is a good thing. That means that, human rights will be respected and stuff like that. And, your leaders won't get corrupt. They won't abuse the general population and stuff. And you could say, well, see, this is why democracy is all better. There's a lot of truth to that and stuff. I won't debate that and stuff. But, what I'm saying is clearly true as well, right? That democracies do cause some type of stagnation, right? They make it so that, your leader would, like any type of democratic leader, would never get any type of meaningful changes accomplished in a society. And this is really the big problem with democracies. They are extremely hindering. They create a lot of limitations, a lot of restrictions and stuff, and this causes your civilization to stay stuck in the mud, right? Again, Mughal India with Shah Jahan, he built up that monument, right? He took all the resources of India, he kind of constructed this marvel of the world. But again, if he was under a democracy, if he was a democratic leader, that would have never been accomplished, right? Because he would have not had the same level of authority, and that's kind of clearly a problem and stuff. And this is why I ultimately believe that democracies, they do cause your civilization to essentially just stay stuck in the mud. What do I mean by that? What do I mean is that your society and civilization isn't go anywhere, essentially, right? Democracy kind of puts your entire civilization and society into some type of, it's kind of hard to determine, but like in some type of, maybe like a limbo state, right? Something like that. It immobilizes your society and civilization. It makes it so that your civilization and society won't be going anywhere, right? Because, like you have to kind of really think about it, right? A strong, like in order for your society to advance, you would need like some person, right, that can, take all the resources and quickly get things done, right? But, the democratic leaders are going to have to go through a lot of legal work in there. They have a lot of restrictions on what they can do and stuff, and this is kind of extremely problematic and stuff. And this is why democracies are kind of not really all that successful. They're stable. That's why democracies are kind of spread around the world. But because democracy offers stability and stuff, but it also creates a lot of hindrance. It prevents a lot of social progress and stuff like that. And this is kind of tricky. And of course, a lot of people would argue and say, well, yeah, so democracies, they help human rights, help protect human rights, they make it so that, corrupt leaders will never get into power or stay in power for too long. And so it kind of checks and balances everything. And that's why democracy is kind of not perfect, but it's the best system we have now. And, there's a lot of truth to this, but you have to kind of admit, right, democratic leaders can only do so much. They can impact a lot of social changes that are meaningful, right? They can like change your society for the better completely. They can only do so much, and that's kind of why democracies are a little bit far from being perfect and stuff like that. And again, democracy, what is democracy? Democracy essentially is mob rule, right? It's just a fanciful way of saying mob rule, right? Mob rule, the majority determine the election results and who gets to be elected and stuff like that. Literally, democracy is just a fanciful way of saying mob rule, and, you have to kind of think about that and appreciate that and, make sure you understand this and stuff.